Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to DeFalco News. I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Rick Foster. He's a very well-known inspector in the area of Horry County. And I wanted to bring him here today to answer a couple of questions and also to give stories about what he has seen that in the eyes of a homeowner they do not see. Even if it is the seller selling the actual home, and also on the other side the buyer walking through the house during their walkthrough, the unknown things that could be seen during an inspection. And also because it seems to be in a hot and heavy market, inspections have been being thrown to the side, and we're seeing a lot of contracts come in as is. If you can give an example of maybe a plumbing, electrical, structural, things that the homeowners do not see.
Sure. One of the things that most homeowners, sellers and buyers, are not going to do is get into the attic. And that's where a lot of problems can be found. Electrical, HVAC, plumbing. I've been in attics that have the plumbing vent stack that vents out through the roof disconnected. Things that a lot of times were done when the house was built, but the current seller probably didn't have an inspection when they bought it. This wasn't picked up. Insulation issues is a huge problem. What I find down here is when contractors are hired to do other work in an existing home, in an attic, they will move the insulation away, and 80% of the insulation down here is loose blown in insulation, so it's very easy to move. So wherever they're working, they'll move the insulation away, they'll finish their work and they'll walk away. So I was in one house. I felt so bad for the woman. She was 85 years old. Her husband just recently died. She was selling the house, but I noticed it was an older house and there was a lot of recessed lighting in the house. Oh yeah, we had that done. A nice guy, gentleman came about 5 years ago and did that for us. There must have been 25 of them. Well, I went into the attic, and wherever he installed one of these hi-hat lights, he had moved the insulation in an area 2 feet around for a 6-inch light and never put it back. So this woman and her husband were living for 5 years with heat just going right out of the attic because the insulation was never put back. Sometimes I see there'll be 3 or 4 of them, and I'll move the insulation back, or cable guys will do the same thing. They'll move the insulation, and if I see that, I'll push it back. When there's 25 recessed lights, I just felt bad for the woman, and I said, you're gonna have to get somebody to put that back. As well as HVAC duct issues that are 80% of the time in the attic. I had a client that the house was only 2 years old, and he was hemming and hawing about getting an inspection, and I don't push people to get an inspection. I said, whatever you feel comfortable with, I'll do. Okay, go ahead and do the inspection. Well, when I got into the attic, the main duct coming off of the air handler had fallen off. And 80% of the air was just blowing into the attic, as well as the return duct had fallen off of the system. This house was 2 years old.
Wow.
So, and that was sucking in all the dust and insulation from the attic into the system and blowing it out throughout the house. So that's a big thing about the attic.
So not even a cost thing, but it's also a health hazard.
Right, and for the $350, $375 he spent, for the seller now to have to fix that was a big deal, and like he said, just finding that was well worth the cost of the inspection.
Right. How about, and I think that's a lot of things that buyers don't even see. They say hot market, I got to get my offer to the top of the table. It looks good visually, but again, these are things that, what was the biggest maybe savior that you have found for a buyer that either made or broke a deal or would have cost them thousands?
In the attic or
anywhere,
just in general?
Anything.
Roofing. Roofing is a big thing.
Okay.
Because again, A lot of people don't get their roofs inspected once a year or once every 2 years like they should, especially a roof that's over 15 years old. A dimensional or architectural shingle, most manufacturers warranty that for 30 years. Now that's not saying it's going to last 30 years. The warranty for the manufacturer says they did not do anything in the factory that's going to cause this shingle to wear out. It doesn't mean it's going to not wear out from weather. Southwest exposures are usually more worn than other exposures on the house, obviously from the sun, and down here in the south. That's a big issue. I was just on one this morning that the two sides of the roof looked like they were done at two different times, but they weren't. They were original, they were 17 years old, and the southwest side was 50% more worn than the front of the roof.
Interesting.
So in that respect, you can negotiate with the seller because you have a roof that's 17 years old. Architectural down here will last 20 to 25 years. That's all you're going to get out of a 30-year shingle. So it's a gray area because what happens is, well, the roof's not leaking, so the roof's fine. But you know, within 3 years' time, they're going to have to spend $15,000 to $20,000 to have the roof done, and that's an average home, not anything that's just a 1,700 square foot home is going to cost that much. So then it's up to the realtor here to try to make some negotiations and say, well, what can we do about this roof that's almost worn out? Yeah, roofing's a big deal, and I've even been on houses where when a house is built, the plumbers, to test the PVC drain lines, it has to be airtight. So they go up and they glue caps on top of the vents that are coming out of the roof. So when they pressurize it for the county inspector, the county inspector actually reads the gauge and makes sure they have a certain amount of pressure that they have to put it at. And the county inspector looks at that gauge. So everything has to be capped off. And I've actually seen it where they forgot to take the caps off of the vents coming out through the roof. And from the ground, you wouldn't know that because a lot of these fit inside. Right. So when I saw that on one that was all of them, I said, do you have trouble? Do the drains slow in the house? And they're like, yeah, sometimes it is kind of slow. I mean, you know, an old soda can that you used to have to open with a can opener. You may not know. You're too young.
I remember.
And if you open one side, it doesn't come out. Right. But if you open the other side, it pours out. That's what these vents do. They pull in air to allow the drains to work properly.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming on and letting people know. I think the moral of the story is just because you cannot visually see everything cosmetically might look great, but it is so important to spend those couple $100 because it could save you thousands in the long run.
And the thing is, when people are looking at houses, you know, they're like, you walk in and they love the way it looks. Right. They're not really looking, and they're not really supposed to test things, test outlets. Oftentimes GFCI outlets, they're the outlets with the little push button in the bathrooms and kitchens and outside garage in more modern homes. They're not working. So that's a less expensive thing, but it's something that has to be fixed because it's a safety.
It is.
Oh, I've opened up electrical panels on the outside. Sometimes there's an extra blank panel next to your meter. It's called a main disconnect. I've opened them up and there's no inside cover. And here's these wires coming out of the ground that are unlimited amperage. And amperage is what can kill a person. Well, these wires are unlimited amperage. It only becomes 200 amps or 150 amps when it hits the breaker for the house. So the wires coming up are unlimited. And there they were, completely exposed. That if they were touched, it would be death. So those kind of things are important.
So not only finance importance, it's also, I mean, it could be life or death, or health. With breathing, you don't know what is being pulled into the house through the vents.
Yep. Exactly what the shingles look like.
How about foundational mold underneath the house that could be growing? And
yeah, whenever a house has a crawl space, that's a big, especially a house that is more than 25 years old.
Yes.
and has a very low crawl space, there could be a whole list of issues in the crawl space alone.
Yeah.
That's why I hate doing crawl spaces from a house that was built in 1980. First of all, they're usually manufactured homes.
Right.
That in 1980, they didn't build that good anyway.
Right.
Nobody was paying attention. Nobody cared. Go ahead, build whatever you want. And then I go under these things, I'm like, oh my God, this is like the end of the deal. I hate to see it.
Right.
But when I'm in crawl spaces like that, I will take 40 pictures and to make sure they know exactly what the underside of the house looks like, as well as attic pictures, roof pictures, pictures of the appliances working, the ages of the appliances, HVAC, water heater, all these things are part of my report, at least anyway.
Right. And they do limit us now with our contracts to, I don't know if you know, under the repair section in our contract, they do limit as far as cosmetic things, and then we have property disclosures to disclose some of the ages of the appliances and major aspects of roof age and HVAC and things. And unfortunately, if a unit is working,
Yeah, there's nothing you can do.
there's nothing you can do. But going in with that information.
Right, and that's the
is
big thing.
important.
Yeah, the air conditioning's working, but it's 17 years old, so be prepared. The
Right.
water heater, I've seen water heaters 35 years old, and they're still working. And people will say, well, how much longer do you think it has? I said, it's been on borrowed time for 20 years now, so I don't know what to tell you. But it's working now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you today, and I
very
think
welcome.
it's very, very important, and I encourage my buyers to do that, even in a hot market. It is so important. It could save you thousands. It could save your life.
Possibly.
So I appreciate it.
All right.
Until next time, thank you.
See ya.